The little girl looked up at me in the middle of that bright afternoon party, holding a melting cupcake in one hand and my sleeve in the other, and said words that made every adult around us fall silent. "You should marry my mommy." For 1 second, the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, and even the sunlight spilling across the garden seemed to freeze. Then I looked across the lawn and saw her mother's face change from polite embarrassment to something deeper, something painful, as if her child had accidentally opened a door she had spent years trying to keep locked. And before I tell you what happened next, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that finds people when they least expect it. My name is Callum Pierce, and that Saturday afternoon was supposed to be simple. I had only gone to the party because my co-worker, Marcellus, kept insisting that I needed to stop hiding from the world. It was his daughter's 7th birthday, held in his sister's backyard, with pastel balloons tied to white chairs, paper flowers hanging from tree branches, children chasing bubbles across the grass, and parents standing in little groups pretending they were not exhausted. I was 38, divorced, and had grown used to spending weekends quietly. I told myself I liked the peace, but the truth was that silence had become a room I could not escape. My marriage had ended 3 years earlier after years of trying to save something that had already turned cold. Since then, I had learned how to cook for one, sleep on one side of the bed, and smile when people asked if I was doing okay. At the party, I stayed near the drink table, helping where I could, carrying plates, picking up fallen napkins, and rescuing a little boy's toy truck from under a chair. That was when I first met the little girl with the cupcake. Her name was Noemi Vale. She had 2 uneven pigtails, a yellow dress with tiny white daisies, and serious brown eyes that made her seem older than she was. She asked me if I knew how to fix a paper crown because hers had ripped. I knelt down, used a piece of tape from the gift table, and repaired it as carefully as if it were made of gold. She placed it back on her head and told me I was good at fixing broken things. I laughed, but the words stayed with me longer than they should have. Her mother, Selah Vale, came rushing over a few minutes later, apologizing because Noemi had apparently been following me around. Selah was not the kind of woman who filled a room loudly. She had a quiet beauty, tired eyes, and a guarded smile that appeared and disappeared quickly, like she was afraid of using too much hope at once. She wore a soft blue dress and carried herself with the careful strength of someone who had learned not to lean on anyone. When she thanked me for helping Noemi, there was warmth in her voice, but also distance. I recognized that distance because I carried the same one. The afternoon went on, bright and ordinary on the outside, but little moments kept pulling us together. Noemi dropped her juice, and I helped clean it. Selah tried to lift a heavy cooler, and I reached it before she could strain her back. A group of kids begged me to judge their chalk drawing contest, and Noemi insisted her mother stand beside me because, according to her, we both had kind eyes. Selah laughed then, really laughed, and for a moment the tiredness left her face. I felt something inside me move, something I thought had gone quiet forever. Then came the cake. Everyone gathered beneath the shade of a large maple tree as Marcellus carried out a pink birthday cake covered in candles. Children crowded around, parents raised phones, and sunlight flashed off the frosting knife. After the song, kids scattered with slices of cake, and Noemi came back to me with frosting on her cheek. She tugged my sleeve like she had known me all her life. I bent down, expecting her to ask for more tape or help opening a juice box. Instead, she looked straight into my eyes and said, clear enough for everyone nearby to hear, "You should marry my mommy. She doesn't smile like this with anybody else." The silence that followed was gentle but heavy. Selah stood only a few steps away, holding a stack of paper plates against her chest. Her cheeks flushed, and she whispered Noemi's name in a way that sounded like a warning and a wound at the same time. People gave awkward little smiles and turned away, trying to pretend they had not heard. I could have laughed it off. I could have made a joke. But when I looked at Selah, I saw tears gathering in her eyes, not because she was embarrassed, but because her daughter had spoken a truth too innocent to protect. I quietly told Noemi that her mommy was very special and deserved someone who made her feel safe every single day. Noemi nodded with complete seriousness, then said her mommy cried sometimes when she thought Noemi was sleeping. Selah's face broke. She turned away quickly, but not before I saw everything she was trying to hide. That was the moment the party stopped being a party for me. It became the day I realized some people are not distant because they are cold. Some people are distant because life has taught them that warmth can burn. Later, I found Selah near the side gate, pretending to check her phone while wiping her eyes. I did not ask for her story. I only told her she had a wonderful daughter. She smiled faintly and said Noemi had a habit of saying things that made adults uncomfortable. Then, after a long pause, she admitted that Noemi's father had left when she was 2. Not dramatically, not with a big fight, but slowly, through missed dinners, forgotten promises, and finally a note on the kitchen counter saying he was not made for family life. Selah had been raising Noemi alone ever since, working as a school receptionist during the day and doing bookkeeping at night. She said it plainly, without asking for pity, but I could hear the exhaustion under every word. I told her I understood what it felt like to rebuild a life with shaking hands. She looked at me then, really looked, and something unspoken passed between us. Not romance. Not yet. Just recognition. 2 people standing in daylight, both carrying invisible ruins, both surprised to find someone else who knew the weight. Over the next few weeks, I kept seeing them. Marcellus invited me to a community picnic, and Selah was there with Noemi. Then a charity school event needed volunteers, and we both ended up arranging chairs in the gymnasium. Noemi always ran to me first, showing me drawings, missing teeth, and tiny treasures from her pockets. Selah always apologized, and I always told her she did not need to. Slowly, her apologies became smiles. Slowly, our conversations grew longer. We talked about ordinary things at first: grocery prices, traffic, children's books, the best way to keep houseplants alive. Then one evening, while cleaning up after a school fundraiser, she told me she had forgotten what it felt like to be asked how she was and have someone wait for the real answer. But healing is never simple. Selah pulled back whenever things became too warm. If I brought coffee, she thanked me but looked afraid. If Noemi invited me to sit with them, Selah watched the room as if waiting for judgment. One afternoon, I offered to fix a loose shelf in her hallway after Noemi mentioned it had fallen twice. Selah's expression changed instantly. She said she did not need rescuing. Her voice was sharp, but her hands trembled. I stepped back and told her I knew she did not. I only wanted to help with a shelf. She looked ashamed afterward, but I understood. People who have been abandoned often mistake kindness for a debt they will later be forced to pay. The real test came on a sunny Thursday afternoon in late spring. Noemi's school called Selah because Noemi had fainted during recess. Selah was across town with no car because hers was at the mechanic. She called Marcellus in panic, but he was stuck in a meeting and called me. I left work without thinking. When I reached the school, Noemi was sitting in the nurse's office, pale but awake, scared because her mother was not there yet. She held my hand until Selah arrived, breathless and terrified. Noemi was fine, just dehydrated and overheated, but Selah collapsed into a chair as if fear had emptied her bones. I stood quietly by the door, ready to leave now that her mother was there. But Selah looked up and asked me to stay. That one word changed something between us. After that day, Selah stopped pretending she could do everything alone. Not completely, not easily, but little by little. She let me carry grocery bags. She let me sit beside her at school events. She let Noemi invite me for lunch after church. And I never pushed for more than she was ready to give. I learned that love, real love, does not rush into someone's broken places demanding to be welcomed. It waits at the door with patience. It proves itself in ordinary hours. Noemi became the bridge neither of us knew how to build. She would place her small hand in mine and Selah's at the same time when crossing parking lots. She would draw pictures of the three of us under a sun too large for the page. Once, during a picnic by the lake, she fell asleep with her head in Selah's lap and her shoes against my knee, and Selah whispered that she was afraid. Afraid that Noemi was becoming attached. Afraid that I would wake up one day and decide they were too much. Afraid that happiness was just another thing that could leave without warning. I told her I was afraid too. Then I told her fear did not have to drive. Months passed. Summer deepened. The world seemed softer around them. Selah's smile came easier. Noemi grew louder, brighter, more certain that life was finally giving her something good. But the past returned the way it often does, without invitation. Noemi's father suddenly contacted Selah, saying he wanted to visit. For days, Selah was restless. She wanted to protect Noemi but did not want to make the choice from bitterness. When he finally came, he arrived with expensive gifts and charming apologies, but Noemi stayed close to Selah. She thanked him politely, then asked why he had missed so many birthdays. He had no answer big enough for such a small voice. I was not there to replace him. I knew that. I never wanted to erase anyone from Noemi's life. But that afternoon, after he left again with promises no one fully believed, Noemi climbed onto the porch swing beside me and asked if people could choose who became family. Selah stood in the doorway, frozen. I told Noemi that sometimes family is born, sometimes family is promised, and sometimes family is proven by the people who keep showing up. Noemi leaned against my arm and said I had shown up a lot. Selah cried quietly that evening, not from sadness alone, but from release. She told me she had spent years believing she had to be both mother and father, both shield and shelter, both the brave face and the broken heart. She said watching me with Noemi had healed something she never admitted was wounded. I told her Noemi had healed me too. So had she. A year after that birthday party, Marcellus hosted another gathering in the same backyard. The same maple tree stretched over the grass. The same kind of balloons moved in the breeze. Noemi, now taller and missing the childish roundness in her cheeks, wore another paper crown. She had made it herself this time, stronger, covered with glitter and crooked stars. Selah stood beside me in a pale green dress, her hand resting comfortably in mine. She no longer looked like a woman bracing for loss. She looked like someone learning to trust the sun again. Before the cake was served, Noemi asked everyone to be quiet because she had an announcement. Selah looked nervous, and I laughed because I remembered the last time Noemi had made a public declaration. Noemi walked to the center of the lawn and said that last year she had asked me to marry her mommy because she thought that was how you kept kind people from leaving. Everyone laughed softly, but her voice grew tender. Then she said she had learned something better. You do not keep people by asking them to stay. You know they love you when they stay without being asked. Selah covered her mouth. My throat tightened. And in that golden afternoon light, with children standing barefoot in the grass and adults wiping their eyes, I took a small velvet box from my pocket. I had planned to ask Selah privately later that evening, but life had brought us back to the exact place where everything began, and suddenly no other moment felt right. I turned to Selah, not with a grand speech, but with the truth. I told her I did not want to rescue her, complete her, or replace anything she had lost. I wanted to walk beside her, love her daughter with steadiness, and build a home where nobody had to earn the right to be cherished. Selah cried before I even finished. Noemi bounced on her toes, whispering yes before her mother could speak. And when Selah finally nodded, the whole backyard erupted in applause. But I only saw her. I only saw the woman who had once stood near the side gate trying to hide her tears, now standing in the open, unafraid to be loved. Near the end of that day, as the sun lowered and the party lights began to glow even though it was still bright enough to see every smiling face, Noemi climbed into my lap and placed her repaired paper crown on my head. She told me I was still good at fixing broken things. I looked at Selah, and she shook her head softly, smiling through tears. I told Noemi that maybe broken things are not always meant to be fixed the way they were. Sometimes they become something new, something stronger, something even more beautiful because the cracks let the light in. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries, because stories like this remind us that kindness can become family, and second chances can arrive in the smallest voices. Please comment kindness still matters if you believe one gentle heart can change an entire life. That night, after everyone left, Selah, Noemi, and I stayed in the quiet backyard under the maple tree. Noemi fell asleep across 2 chairs with frosting still on her sleeve. Selah leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I did not feel like a man surviving the silence. I felt like a man who had finally come home. And all because one little girl at a daytime party had been brave enough to say what 2 wounded adults were too afraid to hope for.